The vast chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension. Representatives from 1,000 worlds shifted uneasily in their seats, appendages of all shapes and sizes fidgeting with datapads and translation devices. At the center of the room, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a blue-green planet spinning serenely in the void. High Counselor Zaxnath, a being of shimmering energy barely contained within a humanoid form, spoke in a voice that resonated through the minds of all present. Esteemed colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation. The species we have been observing on this world, designated Sol 3, has achieved faster-than-light travel. A ripple of surprise and concern swept through the assembly. It wasn't the achievement itself that was shocking. After all, FTL was a prerequisite for joining the galactic community. It was the speed at which these humans had done it. "But that's impossible," exclaimed Gorax, the reptilian representative from the Draconis system. "Our last survey was mere centuries ago. They were still burning hydrocarbons and fighting over imaginary lines on their planet's surface." Zaxnath's form pulsed with what might have been interpreted as a sigh. And yet, here we are. Not only have they achieved FTL, but they've done so using principles that our scientists are still struggling to comprehend. The holographic display shifted, showing schematics of the human FTL drive. To most of the assembled aliens, it looked like a chaotic mess of interconnected systems that shouldn't work, let alone allow for faster-than-light travel. How? The question came from Kilax, a hive-mind entity representing a collective of gas giant-dwelling intelligences. Their brains are so limited, single-core processing units with minimal parallel capabilities. They should be barely sentient by our standards. Zaxnath's form flickered with uncertainty. "We don't know. But what we do know is that they're out there now, exploring, and they're going to find us sooner rather than later. We need to decide how to handle this anomaly." As the council erupted into heated debate, a small ship drifted at the edge of the solar system that housed the Galactic Council's headquarters. Its design was unlike anything seen in the galaxy, all sharp angles and exposed struts, more akin to a half-finished construction project than a spacefaring vessel. Inside, Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth exploration vessel Curiosity stared at her sensor readings with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Holy shit," she whispered, her dark eyes wide with wonder. "We've hit the jackpot, folks." Her second-in-command, Dr. Amit Patel, leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed in concentration. An entire civilization, no, multiple civilizations. The energy readings are off the charts. How did we miss this? Elena shook her head, a wry smile playing on her lips. Who knows? Maybe they've got some fancy cloaking tech, or maybe we just weren't looking in the right way. She paused, considering their next move. "Well, no point in standing on ceremony. Let's say hello." Back in the council chambers, the debate had reached a fever pitch. Some argued for immediately quarantining the Sol system, others for making official first contact. A few of the more militant species even suggested preemptive strikes to neutralize the potential threat. Zaxnath was about to call for order when every communication device in the chamber suddenly crackled to life. A voice, speaking in perfectly accented galactic standard, filled the room. "Greetings, sentient beings of the galaxy. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth exploration vessel Curiosity. We come in peace and in the spirit of scientific and cultural exchange. We gotta say, finding you all here is probably the coolest thing that's ever happened to us. Anyone up for a chat?" The stunned silence that followed was broken by the sound of Gorax's painting, his scales clattering against the polished floor. Zaxnath, recovering quickly, responded, "Captain Rodriguez, this is unexpected. How did you breach our communication systems?" There was a pause, then Elena's voice came back, tinged with embarrassment. "Oh, sorry about that. Your encryption was really elegant, but it had a few holes. We didn't mean to be rude, we just got excited. Should we have knocked first?" The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Zaxnath. Here was a species that had gone from planetary bound to casually breaching the most advanced security systems in the galaxy in the span of a few centuries. It defied all logic. "Perhaps," Zaxnath said carefully, "we should discuss this face to face. Would you be willing to dock with our station and meet with the Galactic Council?" Elena's enthusiasm was palpable even through the audio link. "Absolutely. We'd be honored. Just send over the docking protocols, and we'll be right there. Oh, and don't worry. We've been practicing our alien encounter etiquette. No one's going to try to shake hands with a gaseous entity or anything embarrassing like that." As the communication ended, the council chamber erupted into chaos once again. Zaxnath raised all four of their appendages, calling for silence. "Colleagues, it seems our decision has been made for us. Let us prepare to welcome humanity to the galactic stage, and may the cosmic forces have mercy on us all." Hours later, Elena and her crew stood before the assembled Galactic Council. The humans looked comically out of place, their environmental suits bulky and inelegant compared to the sleek or ethereal forms of the alien representatives. Yet there was an energy about them, a barely contained excitement that seemed to fill the room. "So," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder as she looked around at the assembled aliens, "I guess we have a lot to talk about." Zaxnath's form pulsed with a mix of emotions, curiosity, apprehension, and something akin to awe. "Indeed we do, Captain Rodriguez. Indeed we do. Perhaps you could start by explaining how your species managed to achieve so much in so little time." Elena exchanged glances with her crew, then shrugged. "Honestly, we just kept asking why not. Every time someone said something was impossible, we took it as a challenge. It's kind of our thing." And with those simple words, the galaxy as everyone knew it changed forever. Humanity had arrived on the cosmic stage, bringing with them a unique blend of curiosity, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to accept limitations. The age of human logic had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. As the initial meeting stretched into hours, then days, the members of the Galactic Council found themselves alternating between frustration and fascination. The humans approached every problem, every question, with a perspective that was utterly alien to the established galactic civilizations. Where the Council saw insurmountable obstacles, humans saw opportunities. Where ancient alien civilizations had accepted the laws of physics as immutable, humans asked, "But what if we tried this?" Their solutions were often inelegant, sometimes borderline insane, but they worked in ways that defied conventional understanding. And as the galaxy watched and waited, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity's arrival was not just a new chapter in galactic history. It was the beginning of a whole new book. The integration of humanity into the galactic community was anything but smooth. In the months following first contact, the Galactic Council found itself in a constant state of bewilderment and, occasionally, sheer panic. Humans, it turned out, had an uncanny knack for finding loopholes in carefully crafted galactic laws, pushing the boundaries of established scientific principles, and generally causing chaos wherever they went. Yet, despite the headaches they caused, there was no denying the innovative spark they brought to a civilization that had grown somewhat stagnant over the millennia. It was during one particularly heated council session that the alarms began to blare. High Councillor Zaxnath's form flickered erratically as they absorbed the incoming data. "Esteemed colleagues," they announced, their mental voice tinged with urgency, "we have a situation of utmost gravity." The holographic display at the center of the chamber shifted, showing a region of space near the galactic core. A swirling vortex of darkness was visible, slowly but steadily expanding. "What we're looking at," Zaxnath continued, "is a runaway quantum singularity. It's consuming everything in its path: matter, energy, even the fabric of spacetime itself. Our scientists estimate that if left unchecked, it will consume the entire galaxy within a standard solar cycle." The chamber erupted into pandemonium. Species that had been at each other's throats moments before now huddled together in shared terror. Grax, the reptilian representative, was hyperventilating, his scales changing colors rapidly in distress. Silence. Zaxnath's mental voice boomed, restoring order. We've faced challenges before, and we'll face this one. Our finest minds are already working on a solution. As if on cue, a group of beings floated into the chamber. They were the collective, a hive mind of gas giant dwelling intelligences, widely regarded as the most advanced scientific minds in the galaxy. The collective spoke in unison, their thoughts merging into a single voice. We have analyzed the singularity. Its quantum state is unlike anything we've encountered before. Our current technology is insufficient to address the threat. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. If the collective couldn't solve this problem, what hope did they have? It was Grax who broke the silence, his voice trembling. What about the humans? All eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory apparatuses turned to the human delegation. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood, her face set in determination. We'll need to study the data, but we're ready to help in any way we can. Zaxnath nodded, their form pulsing with a mix of hope and skepticism. Very well. We'll provide you with all the information we have. But understand, Captain, this is beyond anything your species has ever encountered. Elena's lips quirked into a small smile. With all due respect, Counselor, that's what they said about FTL travel, and look where we are now. As the human delegation left to analyze the data, murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Could these newcomers, barely out of their planetary cradle, succeed where the most advanced civilizations had failed? Aboard the human ship Curiosity, now docked at the galactic capital, Elena and her team pored over the information about the quantum singularity. Dr. Amit Patel, the ship's chief scientist, scratched his head in bewilderment. It's like nothing we've ever seen, he muttered. The math doesn't make sense. It's as if the singularity is actively rewriting the laws of physics as it expands. Elena leaned back in her chair, absently twirling a stylus between her fingers. Okay, so we can't beat it with conventional physics. What if we think outside the box? Way outside the box. The team fell into a brainstorming session that would have looked more like controlled chaos to an outside observer. Ideas were thrown out rapid fire, each more outlandish than the last. No concept was too bizarre to consider, no approach too unorthodox to explore. As the hours ticked by, the walls of their lab became covered in equations, diagrams, and hastily scribbled notes. Coffee cups, and their alien equivalents, littered every surface. The air was thick with the energy of human problem-solving at its most intense. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, the mood had grown increasingly grim. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of systems already affected by the expanding singularity. Entire civilizations were being evacuated, fleeing before the encroaching void. Zaxnath was about to call for another status update when Elena burst into the chamber, her hair disheveled and her eyes bright with the fervor of discovery. "We've got it," she exclaimed, oblivious to the startled reactions of the alien dignitaries. "Well, maybe, probably. It's either going to work brilliantly or tear a hole in the universe, but hey, that's kind of happening already, right?" The council stared at her in a mix of hope and horror. Zaxnath managed to regain their composure first. "Captain Rodriguez, please explain. What exactly have you come up with?" Elena grinned, pulling up a holographic display of her own. "Okay, so here's the thing. We can't stop the singularity with our current understanding of physics. So, we propose changing the physics." The silence that followed was deafening. It was Grax who finally spoke up, his voice squeaking slightly. "Changing physics? That's impossible." "See, that's what we thought too," Elena said, her excitement building. "But then we realized the singularity is already changing the rules. So why can't we? We've designed a device that will generate a cascading wave of quantum uncertainty. When it hits the singularity, it'll essentially rewrite the laws of physics in that region of space." The collective chimed in, their unified voice tinged with disbelief. But the consequences of such an action are incalculable. You could cause a chain reaction that destroys the entire universe. Elena nodded soberly. Yeah, we thought of that. But here's the kicker. We're pretty sure we can control the quantum cascade. Instead of letting the new physics spread randomly, we can shape it. We can essentially program the new laws of physics to be stable and, more importantly, incompatible with the singularity's existence. The council chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, each species trying to wrap their minds around the audacity of the plan. It was insane, impossible, and completely against everything they understood about the nature of reality. It was, in short, perfectly human. Zaxnath raised their appendages for silence. Captain Rodriguez, what you're proposing is beyond anything we've ever considered. The risks are incalculable. Elena's expression sobered. I know. Believe me, we've run the numbers. But the way we see it, we're out of options. This is our best shot, maybe our only shot, at saving the galaxy. A tense silence fell over the chamber as the weight of the decision pressed down on them all. They were being asked to put the fate of every living being in the galaxy in the hands of a species that, by galactic standards, were barely more than children. Finally, Zaxnath spoke. We will need time to discuss this. But know this, Captain Rodriguez, whatever our decision, your species has already changed the galaxy in ways we never thought possible. For better or worse, the age of human logic has truly begun. As Elena left the chamber, the debate behind her growing heated once more. She couldn't help but smile. Humanity had always thrived on challenges, on pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. And now, faced with the greatest challenge in galactic history, they were doing what they did best, rewriting the rules of the game. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and at its center stood humanity, ready to either save everything or go out in the most spectacular blaze of glory the universe had ever seen. Either way, it was going to be one hell of a ride. As Earth's war against the Voidborn escalated, the cracks within human society began to show. While many embraced the technological marvels of the Nexus points, others feared them, worried about the implications of this newfound power. Were the Nexus points truly a blessing, or were they a curse waiting to unravel the very fabric of their existence? The Voidborn's tactics grew bolder with each passing day. Their sabotage was no longer subtle. They actively disrupted Earth's global networks, rendering vast regions powerless. Power grids flickered off, communication satellites went silent, and vital information was lost in the chaos. It wasn't just a war over territory or control, it had become a war of survival. Military bases across the globe reported strange anomalies near the Nexus points. Forces sent to investigate often vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but chilling static in their last transmissions. It became clear that the Voidborn's control of these gateways was far beyond what humanity had anticipated. In the shadows of these global catastrophes, whispers of desertion and rebellion grew louder. General Darius Blake, now the appointed head of Earth's Unified Defense Command, stood at the helm of the human resistance. His office, located deep underground in the heart of an uncharted bunker, became the nerve center of all Earth's military operations. Blake's grizzled face bore the weight of countless sleepless nights, and his once proud military stance had been softened by the heavy burden of leadership. Yet, beneath that wariness lay the fierce determination that defined humanity's struggle. Status report. Blake commanded as he entered the war room, the massive holographic display flickering with images of the planet's defense networks. General, Nexus Point 13 in the Pacific has been compromised, said Lieutenant Mara Grayson, her voice tight with tension. We've lost contact with the entire base. Blake clenched his jaw. Deploy Alpha Strike Team. We need to regain control before the Voidborn use it against us. Sir, Grayson continued, there's more. We're detecting increased Voidborn activity near Nexus points worldwide. They're becoming more aggressive. Blake turned toward the holographic display, his gaze hardening as red markers blinked over the map of Earth. The Nexus points were now glowing like beacons, each one a potential gateway for an invasion or a weapon of mass destruction. It was a fight on multiple fronts, and humanity was outnumbered and outgunned. "We can't hold them off like this forever," Blake muttered under his breath. He tapped a few commands on the control panel, shifting the display to focus on the nexus points. "If we lose control of these, we lose everything." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words sinking in. There was no retreat, no fallback plan. The nexus points were the key to survival or destruction. Across the world, the nexus points had become battlegrounds. The skies above them were filled with the hum of drones and the roar of jet engines, while soldiers and scientists worked tirelessly to understand and contain these alien structures. But time was running out. The Voidborn, with their superior understanding of the nexus points, had already begun to warp reality in subtle, terrifying ways. In a remote research facility located near one of the nexus points in the Arctic, Dr. Emily Park and her team worked feverishly to decipher the strange energy patterns emanating from the alien gateway. Emily, a physicist specializing in quantum mechanics, had dedicated her life to understanding the nexus points. She believed that they were the key to unlocking humanity's future, but she had no idea of the dangers that came with them. Emily called out Dr. Kiera Montrose, her colleague, as she rushed into the lab. "We've just detected a massive energy spike. It's unlike anything we've seen before. It's as if the nexus is reacting to something." Emily's eyes widened as she quickly analyzed the data on her tablet. "This can't be right. The energy levels are off the charts. If this continues, the nexus could destabilize the entire region." Kiera nodded gravely. "We need to warn the Defense Command. If the Voidborn are triggering this, it could mean an imminent attack." But before they could send the warning, the ground beneath the facility rumbled violently. The nexus point outside began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light, casting long, flickering shadows across the frozen landscape. The air hummed with an unnatural vibration, and the skies above seemed to ripple as if reality itself were bending. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the room, and the instruments in the lab went haywire. The screens flickered with static, and strange symbols, alien and incomprehensible, began to flash across the monitors. Emily's heart raced. "Get out, now," she shouted to her team as the nexus point outside erupted in a burst of light. The ground splintered, sending ice and debris flying through the air. In the chaos, Emily and Kiera barely managed to escape the facility before it collapsed into the void left behind by the destabilized nexus. As they stumbled away from the ruins, Emily turned to Kiera, her voice trembling. "We're not just fighting the Voidborn. The nexus points themselves, they're becoming weapons." The war was no longer about defense. It had become a race against time. If humanity didn't gain control over the nexus points soon, the very reality they knew could unravel, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. General Blake, receiving word of the Arctic disaster, slammed his fist onto the table in frustration. "We're losing ground. We need a breakthrough, and we need it now." At that moment, Lieutenant Grayson stepped forward. "Sir, there's one more thing. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka believes he's found a way to manipulate the nexus points to turn them against the Voidborn." Blake's eyes narrowed. "What's the catch?" "It's dangerous," Grayson admitted. "If it works, we could use the nexus points as a weapon. If it fails, we could tear the planet apart." Blake stared at the map of Earth, nexus points blinking ominously across the globe. It was a gamble, but one they might have no choice but to take. "Tell Dr. Tanaka to proceed," Blake ordered, his voice grim. "We've run out of time for caution." Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka sat hunched over his workstation deep within the underground research facility. The dim glow from the monitors illuminated his tired face, his hands trembling slightly as he worked tirelessly on a plan that could either save humanity or destroy it. His mind raced through equations and energy signatures, trying to balance the chaotic forces that surged through the nexus points. The room buzzed with the energy of the task at hand. A small team of elite scientists and military advisors surrounded him, each focused on their respective screens, each aware of the gravity of their situation. The atmosphere was thick with tension. If they failed, there would be no second chance. Dr. Tanaka's fingers flew across the keyboard as he input the final parameters. The idea was deceptively simple. Use the energy of the nexus points to create a destabilizing feedback loop that would disrupt void-born control over them. In theory, it could force the alien entities out of the nexus points, or at least weaken their hold. But one miscalculation could cause a chain reaction, sending the unstable energies of the nexus spiraling out of control. Dr. Tanaka. A voice came from behind him. It was General Blake, standing tall and resolute despite the dire situation. Is this going to work? Tanaka didn't look up from his screen. It's complicated. I've calculated every possible outcome, and even with everything accounted for, there's a significant chance this could backfire. If the nexus points are linked in ways we don't fully understand, the whole system could collapse. Blake's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he considered the consequences. And if we don't do this? Tanaka stopped typing and turned to face the general, his expression grim. If we do nothing, the Voidborn will continue to strengthen their control over the nexus points. They'll either use them to invade en masse, or worse, they'll destabilize them intentionally. If that happens, Earth itself could break apart, piece by piece. Blake clenched his fists. He had been through countless battles in his life, but none like this. No amount of military training could prepare him for a war against an enemy that could manipulate the very fabric of reality. Still, he knew one thing for certain: doing nothing wasn't an option. Do it, Blake said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. We take the risk. Tanaka nodded, his heart pounding as he initiated the sequence. The entire facility hummed with a low, ominous vibration as the system began to come online. Monitors displayed streams of data, each line more complex than the last, as the nexus points across the globe were slowly brought under their control. Outside, across Earth, the nexus points shimmered with an eerie, pulsating light. At each site, military forces stood ready, their weapons aimed at the unknown. Drones hovered in the air, scanning for any signs of void-born activity. Civilians had been evacuated from the surrounding areas, leaving once bustling regions eerily silent. The Arctic nexus point, still radiating strange energy after the previous disaster, was now the focal point of the operation. Emily Park and Kiera Montrose stood on the frozen tundra, staring at the unstable gateway. They knew what was coming. If Tanaka's plan worked, they would witness the shift in real time. Hold steady, Emily said, her voice muffled by the howling wind. If this goes wrong, we're the first to know. The nexus began to vibrate more intensely, the once steady pulses of light flickering chaotically. The sky above rippled, as if the very fabric of space was being twisted and torn. And then, without warning, the nexus points around the world lit up in unison, a blinding flash that temporarily blocked out the stars. In the command center, General Blake watched the displays intently. Status report, he barked. Grayson, seated at a nearby console, quickly scanned the incoming data. Sir, all nexus points are showing signs of destabilization, but the feedback loop is holding. The Voidborn's energy signature is weakening. Blake allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. Sir, Grayson continued, her voice growing tense. We're detecting something else. It's coming from the nexus points. Massive energy spikes. We didn't anticipate this. Blake's eyes narrowed. Explain. Tanaka rushed to Grayson's side, reviewing the data. His face paled. The Voidborn, he began, his voice shaky. They're not just losing control. They're retaliating. Across the globe, at every nexus point, Voidborn forces emerged in waves. Their ships materialized from the tear in space, dark and menacing, that alien technology buzzing with a strange, otherworldly energy. Soldiers on the ground, stunned by the sudden invasion, scrambled to defend their positions. In the Arctic, Emily and Kira watched in horror as the air itself seemed to crack open, revealing dozens of void-born ships. Their sleek insectoid designs glistened under the pale sun, and without hesitation, they unleashed a barrage of energy blasts toward the human forces stationed near the nexus point. "Take cover," Emily shouted, diving behind a snowbank as the explosions rocked the ground. In every part of the world, a similar scene unfolded. The Voidborn, pushed to desperation, had thrown everything they had into a counterattack. They were no longer subtle or strategic, they were out for blood. Blake watched the disaster unfold on the monitors, his heart sinking. "Tanaka, what the hell happened?" Tanaka's hands shook as he tried to recalibrate the system. I don't know. The nexus points. They're reacting to something we didn't see coming. We destabilized their control, but now the Voidborn are trying to collapse the whole network." Blake stamped his fist on the table. "We need to stop this, now." "I'm trying," Tanaka shouted, his voice filled with panic. "But if I shut it down now, the entire system could overload. We could lose the nexus points completely, or worse, cause a chain reaction that will wipe out half the planet." Blake took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Then we hold them off. We need time." "How long do you need?" Tanaka glanced at the screen, the calculations spinning in his mind. 30 minutes, maybe less." Blake nodded, turning to Grayson. "Order all forces to defend the nexus points at all costs. They hold the line, no matter what." Grayson relayed the orders as Blake stared at the maps, the red markers representing Voidborn forces spreading like wildfire. It was a race against time, a desperate fight for survival. Outside the Arctic nexus point, Emily and Kiera fired back at the advancing Voidborn soldiers, their pulsed rifles barely enough to slow them down. The alien forces moved with inhuman precision, their weapons tearing through the human defenses like paper. "We can't hold them off much longer," Kiera shouted over the roar of gunfire. Emily gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They were scientists, not soldiers, but in this war, everyone had to fight. Just as the Voidborn forces closed in, a deafening roar filled the air. Above them, the human air force arrived, jets streaking through the sky and unleashing a barrage of missiles into the alien ships. The Voidborn, momentarily caught off guard, retreated, giving the human forces a brief reprieve. "We're not done yet," Emily muttered, her grip tightening on her rifle. "We just need to hold them off a little longer." Back in the command center, Tanaka's fingers flew across the keyboard, his mind racing against the clock. The nexus points were on the verge of collapse, but there was still hope. If he could stabilize the feedback loop, if he could just keep the system from tearing itself apart, humanity might stand a chance. Blake watched the timer count down, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle for Earth was far from over, but for the first time, they had a fighting chance. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burning debris. In every corner of the globe, the battle for Earth raged on. The skies over the Arctic were filled with streaks of light as human jets weaved between the hulking Voidborn ships, exchanging fire. The ground shook as the alien forces pressed their attack. The human soldiers dug in, struggling to hold their lines. Emily Park wiped the frost from her helmet visor, crouching low behind a makeshift barricade of shattered ice and metal. Beside her, Kiera Montrose reloaded her pulse rifle, her breath visible in the freezing air. They had managed to push the Voidborn back temporarily, but it wouldn't last. "We need to fall back," Kiera shouted over the roar of the battle. "We're sitting ducks out here." Emily shook her head. "If we retreat now, we lose the nexus point, and with it, any chance of stopping them." She peered over the barricade, watching as the alien ships loomed closer, their dark silhouettes casting an eerie glow over the icy landscape. Far above them, the nexus point pulsed with chaotic energy, a swirling storm of light that seemed to bend reality around it. It was unstable, dangerously so, but it was also the only weapon they had against the Voidborn. Dr. Tanaka's plan had started something unpredictable, and now they had to see it through. A loud explosion rocked the ground as a Voidborn ship fired directly at their position, sending a shockwave that knocked both Emily and Kiera off their feet. Emily's ears rang as she struggled to stand, the world spinning around her. She looked up just in time to see another blast heading their way. But before it could hit, a shield of light shimmered into existence above them, absorbing the impact. Emily blinked, confused for a moment, before she saw the source, a squad of human soldiers, their exosuits crackling with energy as they marched forward, shields raised and weapons firing. Reinforcements, Hera gasped, pulling herself back to her feet. The leader of the squad, a tall figure in a high-tech combat suit, strode up to them, his helmet visor reflecting the glowing nexus point. "You two," he barked, his voice amplified through his suit's speakers. "Get to the command post. We'll hold the line here." Emily hesitated. "But the nexus?" The soldier cut her off. "We've got this. Your job is to make sure that thing doesn't blow us all to hell. Now go." Reluctantly, Emily nodded, grabbing Kiera by the arm and pulling her toward the command post, which was nothing more than a small, hastily constructed bunker buried in the ice. As they ran, the sounds of battle filled the air. Explosions, the crackle of energy weapons, and the unearthly screeches of the Voidborn. Inside the bunker, the command post was a flurry of activity. Soldiers and technicians worked side by side, monitoring the nexus point's energy levels and coordinating the defense effort. At the center of it all was General Blake, his eyes fixed on a series of holographic displays that showed the global battlefield. He looked up as Emily and Kiera entered, his expression grim. "Status." "The Voidborn are pushing hard," Emily said, catching her breath. "We've got reinforcements, but it's not enough. They're throwing everything they have at us." Blake nodded, his jaw tight. "It's the same everywhere. They're trying to overwhelm us, hoping to break through before we can stabilize the nexus points." Kiera stepped forward, her voice urgent. "What about Dr. Tanaka? Has he made any progress?" Blake's eyes darkened. "He's close, but we're running out of time. If the nexus points destabilize any further, we won't just lose control, we'll lose the entire planet." Emily's heart sank. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing it laid out so plainly was a gut punch. "What can we do?" Blake turned to the monitors, his gaze hard. "We need to buy him more time. We hold the nexus points, no matter the cost." Just as he spoke, an alarm blared throughout the command post. One of the technicians frantically tapped at her console, her face pale. "Sir, the Arctic nexus point. It's reaching critical levels." Blake cursed under his breath, turning to the display that showed the Arctic region. The nexus point's energy signature was spiking wildly, the once stable pulses now erratic and dangerously unstable. If it went critical, the resulting explosion could tear a hole in space-time large enough to wipe out half the planet. Emily's mind raced. She had spent years studying the nexus points, but nothing had prepared her for this. "We can't let it go critical," she said, her voice shaky. "If we do, it'll tear open a rift we can't close." Blake nodded grimly. "What do you need?" Emily hesitated, her mind working through the possibilities. "We need to stabilize the feedback loop," she said finally. "If we can reroute the excess energy, we might be able to bring it back under control." Blake didn't hesitate. "Do it." Without another word, Emily rushed to one of the nearby consoles, her fingers flying over the controls as she accessed the nexus point systems. Kiera stood by her side, watching the displays with growing concern. "Can you really fix this?" Kiera asked quietly. Emily didn't look up. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we have to try." As she worked, the ground beneath them shook again. The battle outside was intensifying, and the Voidborn weren't giving up. Every second counted, and Emily knew they were running out of time. At that moment, the bunker's communications console crackled to life. "This is Tanaka," came the scientist's voice, strained but determined. "I've managed to stabilize most of the nexus points, but the Arctic one is still out of control. I need more time." "We're working on it," Blake replied, his voice tight with tension. "But we're under heavy fire. The Voidborn are pressing us on all sides." Tanaka was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was a hint of desperation in his voice. "General, if we can't stabilize the Arctic nexus in the next 5 minutes, we'll lose everything. The entire network will collapse." Blake's jaw clenched. "Understood. Do whatever it takes." The general turned to Emily, his eyes filled with unspoken urgency. "How close are we?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Her focus was entirely on the screen in front of her, where lines of code and data scrolled by at an impossible speed. The nexus point's energy was spiraling out of control, but she was so close to bringing it back from the brink. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, her fingers moving faster than she thought possible. "Come on." Outside, the battle raged on. Human forces, stretched to their limits, fought desperately to hold the line. The Voidborn, sensing their desperation, pressed harder, their attacks growing more vicious by the second. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she entered the final command. For a moment, the screen froze, the entire system hanging in the balance. And then, with a soft beep, the nexus point's energy levels began to stabilize. The wild fluctuations smoothed out, the chaotic pulses returning to a steady, rhythmic beat. "We did it," Emily whispered, hardly believing it herself. "We stabilized the feedback loop." Blake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good work, Dr. Park. Now let's finish this."